Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Paul Doles. Am I pronouncing it right? Paul
You are,
Doles?
you're good. Yep.
Paul Doles, perfect. From Monrovia High School. And Paul is generous enough to share some of his time with us today and share kind of I guess the good and the bad and the ugly of what's happening at school now. So thanks for being with us, Paul. I really appreciate it.
Oh man, it's my pleasure, Mike. I appreciate the invitation and it's an honor to be here with you for sure.
Man, this is, I'd love for our listeners to hear what kind of we were just casually talking about before, that I'm fighting COVID. I'm on day 12. You're on day 3 of school. And, you said your voice was a little bit
Yeah.
worn and I'm feeling the pain too, but can you share more about that? Like what you were just sharing with me earlier?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting because everybody's kind of experiencing this collectively together, but we're all experiencing it in a different way. Coming back to school, Wednesday was our first day back. There was just so much excitement and so much energy to finally be back with kids, full classrooms. In LA County, we're masked inside, so it was definitely different in so many ways as far as being able to read the facial expressions of kids and for them to be able to read how you're feeling. I kept reminding myself, they don't know I'm smiling underneath my mask. They might think my sarcasm is meant as something mean-spirited instead of funny. But I think there's so much uncertainty that's still going on. And I think we're just kind of doing the very best we can collectively as a group and as a community. But to just realize that where we were and where we've been and to come this far forward as far as getting us back together in schools. I mentioned, before we went on the air, we're hosting a football game tonight. We haven't done that in 2 years, with the exception of families that were able to come watch their kids play last year. The kids are really excited to be able to come into the stadium tonight. There's this electric feeling going on, but there's this underlying anxiety that just kind of permeates everybody in certain ways. And I think it is, unless you're doing it, there's not a true understanding of that feeling. If you're not in front of kids on a daily basis, it can be really hard to explain that feeling, which is honestly one of the frustrations I have with all the other stuff going on, where, the schools have become a ground zero for the politics of our society, which is terrifying to me. And, I'm just glad to be back with my kids on a daily basis where we can build those relationships that are so important and at least insulate themselves from that for a little while each day.
And that's so great what you're doing, Paul. And I applaud you and salute you. And man, you're right there. My mom was a teacher for many years, and I just have so much respect for teachers and admiration and appreciation. So man, thank you for what you do. And
Sure.
and the part that I'd love to get more of your insights and experience, because you're on the front line, you're right there, you're in the trenches. So I'd love to hear more about that anxiety level, because there's the excitement, which everybody's glad to be together again and they're socializing, and they haven't for however long it's been, 18 months, and now they're back together, which is incredible. But there's that little underlying fear and that anxiety. What are some of the things that you've noticed that either your school or on a district level have done to help give your kids more tools to combat that anxiety? Or has anything happened? Or are you guys starting to bring in additional programs for school assemblies? Or what's working, what isn't? I'd just love to hear what you guys have been, doing that you've found that worked, or other things you'd like to add more of and see more of.
For sure. I think, one of the things that our district has done really well, before the pandemic even came through, we had a wellness center on campus that's staffed with school psychologists and counselors and tutors. And it was led by just this wonderful, wonderful spirit who we actually lost a year and a half ago now. Well, almost, October. And so it's just a year. It'll be a year in October that we lost Susan.
I'm so sorry.
But the attention that is being paid to the mental health needs of our kids, and it's one of the benefits, honestly, of the pandemic, of finding the silver linings of every situation, is we're seeing more conversation regarding the social and emotional well-being of our kids and the social emotional learning of our kids that those conversations were really pushed to the background. They were classified as the soft skills and the ability to be empathetic, the ability to be kind to each other, to put yourself in someone else's shoes. But just even the acknowledgement, honestly, of anxiety as a legitimate mental condition that people are dealing with. And I deal with it. I deal with anxiety and depression. And I watch it in our young people. And I'm just grateful now that we're opening doors for kids to talk about it. It's not something that they have to be seen as quote unquote, well, they're defective, there's something wrong with them. That we're just dealing with our society in general of looking at it not as a weakness, but as a characteristic. And what do we do to provide kids the tools that they need? We instituted a seminar class or an advisory period that a lot of schools are going to around the country, where they're dedicating time each week or day to character development and SEL learning, so that you're having open conversations in classroom settings, just like you would about history or math or science. We're talking about anxiety, we're talking about depression, we're talking about empathy and kindness, and what does that look like from their perspective, and most importantly, giving them an opportunity and a safe place for them to talk about it, where the environment is a safe environment where they have an ability and a willingness to be brave and to be, I don't want to use the word rewarded for it, but be encouraged towards it, is something that I'm really proud of here. And I know is taking place in a lot of schools. I don't think it's unique to Monrovia. I think our society has realized finally that there are two learning things happening here. There's the academic side, but there's a social emotional side. And what we're hearing more and more is companies and people are looking towards those quote unquote soft skills as the true determination of whether somebody's going to be successful in their company or in their profession. And that's exciting for me as somebody who has always kind of excelled in the soft skills, but maybe struggled in that other area. It's nice to almost be validated a little bit to say, okay, so my ability to be empathetic is actually a strength and not a weakness.
Absolutely. Yeah, the soft skills are the new in-demand skills.
Yes.
For every Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
So it's and as someone like you, Paul, that struggled with anxiety and depression, I did too. And every now and then I still do, but especially in K through 12, man, it was brutal. And we didn't have the wellness center that you guys have. We didn't have the open, safe space to have a conversation about that. It was just suffer silently. That's it. And, and so
and suffer in isolation.
Yeah, all by yourself.
And that was the scariest part for me, honestly, while we were out, was I knew kids who that isolation could be a tipping point for them.
Right.
And so trying to be deliberate and authentic with those kids, especially, and reaching out maybe a little more than normal, because that isolation is just terrifying to me.
How did you guys do that? That's so cool. I love that you did that. Now, how would you guys reach out on a daily level, a weekly level, a monthly? Because my nieces, they had that, and they said they're in middle school, and they are in LA school district, and they were someone from the school would reach out once a month, they said, and they felt that it was good, but it just wasn't enough. So,
right.
I mean, are you guys doing a kind of a weekly thing, or how does that look?
I think it's not even a structured effort at this point. It needs to be. I think there needs to be an even greater deliberate directive for us to be doing that. For me, it was the kids who were on my rosters that I was working with through my leadership classes or through my AVID class that I knew needed that extra boost. And whether it was setting up, Zoom's great. I mean, you and I have never met until today, but now I see Mike Sullivan on my screen. I know what you look like and we're talking. This is a great tool for even when we have come back to school. For a student, as we progress in the next couple of weeks and I get to know these kids a little bit better, there's going to be kids that I'm going to say, hey, at 6 o'clock tonight, you and I are going to Zoom. And they're not going to come into the office where it's going to be, kids are watching them come in to have a one-on-one conversation with me, but I'm going to be doing a lot more of a deliberate one-on-one, 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't take hours. You're not necessarily stepping into the role of a therapist or a counselor, but just having that one-on-one where that kid who maybe is sitting isolated in the room, whether they're isolated self isolated or just that's how they feel, they need that one-on-one attention. And what that does is it gives that kid a sense of belonging within the room, but it also helps build that relationship that maybe there's some walls that you have to knock down. That it sounds strange, but it can be done over a digital environment much easier for kids who thrive in that, or at least will be more comfortable in that setting.
You know what? God bless you, Paul, because that's so cool. I'm gonna steal a friend's quote. His name is Josh Ship, and he's a motivational speaker. Does the same
Okay.
thing I do. It's self-love, helping kids be the best version of themselves. And Josh always said something that you just talked about, and that you're living it. Josh said every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story.
Yep.
And you don't have to be the therapist. You don't have to be anything other than just being your caring self, and you're checking in. How you doing, Billy? How you doing, Sandy? I'm here. I care. Let's tell me
Yeah,
what's going on. And that's more than enough.
it
That's
is.
more than enough. You care. The kids know it. They feel it. They love you for it. That's life changing. So good for you, man.
Thanks, man. One of my dear friends, Dr. Philip Campbell, he's the ambassador for Jocelyn's Renaissance, but he's a lifelong educator. And, his catchphrase is every kid needs to be seen, heard, and loved.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I've preached that from the mountaintops here in Monrovia. I tell kids in assemblies, I tell them all the time, I tell them in class, I want them every day. Parents used to ask kids when they would come home, so what did you learn today? Well, I'm encouraging parents here to ask them, Billy, do you feel like you were seen, heard, and loved at school today?
Awesome.
And if the answer is no, then I want to know about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not out to bust people. I'm not out to call people out, but I want to know. But if the answer is yes, then I can guarantee you that Billy also learned that day.
Yeah.
And that is and that's one of the hardest parts of the soft skills, Mike, honestly, is they're much harder to measure than a test score, right, or a score on a homework assignment. It's hard to measure that growth when it comes to those kinds of things. But those three basic needs that Phil captures so well in his talks and his motivational speeches, if I can look a kid in the eye and they can look me in the eye and they know that I care about what they're saying and what they're feeling and that I genuinely love them, at first it creeps kids out because
sure.
The sad part is because they're not hearing it.
Right.
They haven't heard that from people. And it's a process where by the end of their time with me, I want them to know there's no doubt.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that they are loved
and loved.
Seen, heard, and loved.
That's awesome. Paul, man, this is so great. I wish every school had a Paul Doles at their school, because that's incredible. Really, and not just blowing sunshine your way. I think it's so critical. I mean, with all the various teachers like yourself I've spoken with, and then principals and assistant superintendents, they're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
That the kids that feel safe and feel heard and feel validated and feel valued are the ones that thrive. They're the ones that their grades, even if they're struggling with their grades, all of a sudden their grades start doing better. They're starting to feel more comfortable in their own skin. They're not as depressed. They're not as isolated. They're not as anxious. The social emotional skills are really, I think, the most important element in a child's education, because everything falls into place. It's like a train on a track.
Yeah.
The social emotional skills are off. The track isn't solid. The train's all over the place. But you have nice, character development on how to love ourselves, how to make good decisions in tough situations, how to be kind and empathetic to others. That's the track. Yeah. And that's everything out for their life. Like you're mentioning, what companies are looking for, qualities in individuals for their future employees, what future husbands and wives look for in their spouse. So families, how to conflict resolution, all the buzzwords, but it's just true. It's all SEL skills.
Yeah, so, for sure.
I love that you're doing this, and man, thank you so much, Paul. And if there's anything else, any last bit of advice for any teachers or parents or admin that's listening to you right now, is there anything that you'd love to see more of?
Yeah, there's a lot, but I think it's, for me, I always come back to the idea of the parable of the sower, and that we really never know what impact we're going to have on kids or on people in a positive way or even a negative way. And that you just have to keep going. You have to keep pursuing kids, especially those that are maybe a little resistant at first. And that pursuit is part of our calling and what we do. And you keep sowing those seeds in kids, and then you watch it grow. It's one of the hardest parts of what we do, is that legacy we don't always see.
Mm.
We don't know what somebody's going to remember. I got a letter from a girl who had graduated this past year, and I had her as a freshman. And I didn't get her after her freshman year. But at graduation, she came into the room, which our room opens up onto the field where they go to graduate. She came in and she left a letter on my desk that I read that night. And it broke my heart in a positive way, for lack of I was just bawling my head off, because she was quoting literal quotes of what I said to them in her freshman class.
Wow.
And she said, "You don't understand what you did for me. I was in a really bad place and you cared enough to pull me out of it." That to me is the perfect example of what that sowing the seeds for kids means. And we just have to continue to be that positive place for them, and that positive influence on them, to give them the opportunity to shine, to give them the opportunity to grow into what their capabilities are. They've got enough people telling them they can't. And I really want to make sure that those of us that have the blessing and the opportunity, because it really is an opportunity that most people don't get, to shape the lives of a group of kids. I'm sitting facing my empty classroom right now, but there's 35 kids in here 4 times a day that they're not lucky to have me. I'm lucky to have them.
Wow.
And it's just a huge opportunity to get to walk beside them on that journey. And I think the other piece of advice I try to give teachers is, remember that we're walking beside them and we're not walking in front of them. We're blessed to be on their journey, but we're just as blessed that they're part of ours. And it's the greatest job in the world, man. There's no question. It's the greatest job in the world. And it is hard, but it is a blessing. And you bless kids every single day. And sometimes you just don't know it until years down the line.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Doles, thank you so much, brother. That was beautiful. I don't even know what else to say. That's the perfect way to end this. So thank you for making time for us today, and thank you for being part of this.
It's my pleasure, Mike. I truly appreciate it. And thank you for all you do.